We're on page 99. We're beginning the Shmone Esrai. And we got to the third word, which is the name of Hashem. I tried to explain, at least on a superficial level, how to think of it, but I was asked a question by the fellow who sits here, and I did not answer it clearly. I was a little bit confused when I answered it, so I want to try to answer it again in a more complete way. When you look in the text, the name is spelled with 4 Hebrew letters, a Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey, with no vowels. Thank you very much. No vowels are printed. And as a matter of fact, we pronounce it as the name which is in a line above. We had the verse that we started with. Hashem should open my lips. Aleph Daled Nun Yud. That's the way we pronounce it. We pronounce it. But of course, that isn't it. It is Yud and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. And we don't pronounce those letters at all. But this practice is based on an explicit verse in the Torah. Now, if you have the blue books there, it will be good to take a look for a minute. This is in the, I'll tell you what page it is. Yeah, it's on page 305. This is Moses at the burning bush, and one of the questions he asks of Hashem before he goes down to Egypt is, when I go there and the people will ask me, what is your name? What shall I tell them? It's a very difficult passage. Not clear why they would ask such a question. The Rambam objects altogether, but all right. And God gives him, so to speak, 3 answers. Some say it's 2. At any rate, this is what Hashem says to him, starting in verse 14. He says, I shall be as I shall be. That's one thing he says. And he said, so shall you say to the children of Israel, I shall be has sent me to you. God said further to Moses, so shall you say to the children of Israel, Hashem, the God of your forefathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my remembrance from generation to generation. So when Moses wants to know how to respond when they ask for his name, Hashem gives him several things to say, and each one has a great deal to be understood. The last one, so shall you say to the children of Israel, Hashem. Now that Hashem in English is the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and Hey in Hebrew, the most proper name. Now, Hashem, who is the God of your forefathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name, and this is my resemblance. What's this? Well, the most prominent thing in the previous sentence is the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and Hey. That's the subject. That's what names who it is that's coming. God of our forefathers, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is a functional relationship that he had with them. That's also important. And sometimes you can identify a person by his functional relationship. Someone says to me, who's that? I say, he's my father. I've told you something important. And it could be true. But it doesn't compare with his proper name, which picks him out independently of any relationships to anyone else. Picks him out, so to speak, in terms of what he is, his own identity. So, Hashem says, tell them, Hashem, who's related to your forefathers in such and such a way, it sent me to you. Now it says, this is my name forever. So the this ought to go back to the Hashem, Yod and a Hey and a Vav and a Hey. This is my name forever. Now if you look in the Hebrew, those of you who can understand the Hebrew, you see on the right-hand column, you see where it has the little letters Chamishi? So on that line, third word in, Zeh Shmi Laolam. This is my name forever. Now those of you who know Hebrew, the word Laolam there is spelled in an odd way. Usually it has a Vav for the O sound. Le'olam would be Ayin Vav Lamed Mem. But it's missing the Vav. And the commentators point out, and Rashi brings it, that Ayin Lamed Mem, that root means to hide. That lam means missing. So, taking into account the missing Vav, this verse expresses lots and lots and lots of things, but one of the things expresses is, this is my name to be hidden. So, that means not all of the name is open, not all of the name is on the surface, not all of the name is accessible to everyone. Something of it is hidden. And then it goes on to say, and this, not clear what this is my remembrance. It's how I'm remembered from generation to generation. So the commentators explain as follows. The name is formed by the four letters, Yud and Hey, Vav and Hey. But we mention it and remember HaKadosh Baruch Hu by pronouncing it in a different way, as the name of Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yud, which I got confused yesterday talking about the vowels, not the vowels, letters as well, it's just as you said. And what we're doing is, we have a single compound reality that has two aspects. It has the spelling, Yud and a Hey, the Vav and Hey, and the pronunciation, which is really the pronunciation of a different name altogether. And the verse indicates that something is going to be my name, and something is going to be my remembrance, and they're not identical. So that much we can get directly out of the commentators. Now, if you fill in the philosophical background, specifically the Kabbalistic background, it works like this. We said that the quality that's associated with the Yud and the Hey, Vav and Hey name is mercy. Mercy comes, as we said, from a being who has a relationship with you and has set up standards. And if you fail to meet those standards, then he withholds the normal consequences of justice, either withholds them altogether, or softens them, or accompanies them with some other kind of reinforcement. It's someone who's invested in you, cares about you, takes responsibility for you. That is to say, the picture here is a picture of a giver. He has a program and he's a giver. Now the question is, can I relate to that giver? Maybe yes, maybe no. It depends upon what he wants to give. It depends upon whether I'm prepared to receive what he wants to give. And in life, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I have something for you. I paid a lot of money for it and I can't use it, so I'm giving it to you as an act of friendship. Really? What is it? It's a ticket to a lecture by Einstein. Oh, and I thought it was a football game. Einstein? What's he? Eric Einstein? No, not the Israeli reformer. No, Albert Einstein. Well, what's he going to do? Play the saxophone? No, he's going to talk about curved space-time. Gee, it's nice that you thought of me, but maybe you could give it to somebody else. Like, I won't know what to do with it. So, if you're dealing with a recipient who's perfectly prepared to give what the giver wants to give, then there can be a direct relationship between the giver and the recipient. But if not, there has to be an intermediary. An intermediary who knows the giver, knows what the giver's repertoire is, knows the recipient, knows the weaknesses of the recipient, and then guides the gift in such a way that the recipient can receive it and benefit from it. And that's, again, on a very superficial level, that's the difference between the two names. The Aleph Dalet Nun Yud Mem, which we pronounce, that's the name of this lower aspect, which relates to the giver and also relates to the recipient, and, so to speak, fine-tunes the gift by sometimes filtering some of it out and sometimes coloring some of it, so the recipient can take it. Saying the name, the Yud and Hey Vav Hey name, with its own vowels, which exist, would mean having a direct relationship to the giver because you're totally prepared to give what he wants to give. There are people like that, and there may be occasions like that, but there's a desperate need for another type of relationship, a mediated relationship where between the giver and the recipient there is something which modifies or reduces the intensity of the gift so the recipient can receive it. And that's what we pronounce. We pronounce that name. The name Aleph Dalet has that lower function. So usually, but when we pronounce it, we're invoking the name that's written, only the sounds we make are the sounds of the lower name. We're not abandoning the other name. We're interacting with a compound reality, which encompasses both the written letters Yud and a Hey, Vav and a Hey, and the pronunciation of the name Aleph Dalet Nun Yud. So that's really what, in a very simplified sense, that's what's going on when we do it this way. Yeah.
With Vav, then there is a problem because every say movement or group of Jews pronounce it differently. So, some pronounce Oi, some pronounce A, some pronounce O. And like, if we are talking about like anything else, it doesn't really matter, like it's an accent, but like with the name of God, we have preserved in this tradition then.
Well, I'll tell you, you're raising a very interesting issue, and it's quite a subtle issue. I'll tell you something which is even more drastic than that. Because that we have no direct information about how you pronounce the vowels and so forth and so on. But there is a halacha in the Gemara that you should lengthen your pronunciation of the Dalet. Boy, that's challenging. D, head. How could you lengthen the D? And from that, some bring a proof that at least the way we say the Dalet isn't correct. And if I'm not mistaken, the Yemenites say it like a TH. And they can say hef, because you can lengthen that. But you can't lengthen a D. But the development of the way in which Jews pronounce and the way in which they do various mitzvos isn't arbitrary, it isn't accidental, it's guided by divine providence, and each group has a right to say that I have a legal basis for doing it my way, even though there are contradictory groups. And I'll give you an example of this. I hope you'll come across this in your actual experience. A Sefer Torah, the one visible difference between an Ashkenazi Sefer Torah and a Sephardi Sefer Torah, that the Ashkenazim lay the Sefer Torah down flat on a table, and the Sephardim have a beautiful metal case which they stand upright. But it's more than that. There are differences in the letters. Now, there's a difference of opinion in whether the difference of letters renders a Sefer Torah invalid. So there are different opinions about it. Well, what happens if I belong to a group and my group has this as its tradition, what's called in Hebrew a chazaka, and another group have that as their tradition? So you're allowed to rely on your tradition, even if there are contradicting traditions. There's no proof that your tradition is incorrect. And that being the case, legally, you're allowed to rely on it. Even though you know mathematically that if there are 6 traditions, other things being equal, there's only a 1/6 chance that yours hasn't been changed. But legally, you're allowed to do it anyway, because we follow the legal rules. And legal rules supersede what you would think of as logical or mathematical rules. So now, what the question is this: suppose I'm visiting in a Sephardi shul and they give me an aliyah. Can I make a blessing on their Sefer Torah? And the answer is yes, I can, because they have a legally valid tradition that their Sefer Torah is right. So I can borrow their tradition and use it. So Here too, the pronunciations are pronunciations which typically, are developed in ways that we don't have a history for. And although I have seen some who say that probably the Yemenites are closer to the original pronunciation because every difference in writing for them is a different sound. And for us, we don't have different sounds. If you put a dogesh, a dot in a dalet, that changes the way they say it. Doesn't change the way we say it. An aleph and an ayin, we say the same way. Sephardim don't say it that way. They say them quite differently. So even though I can project that historically, but there's no place where I can say that a mistake was made and I was disqualified, and therefore we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so that's what's going on with the name, and I hope that helps to clarify what I said yesterday. Yesterday I was a little confused about it. Okay, back to page 99. Now, the next words are what we just read in the Torah. Well, it starts with our God and God of our forefathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. Let me ask you, anything of note or interest when we say our God and God of our fathers? Anything that you would want to have clarified or explained?
Why is it listed separately?
Say again?
Why is it listed separately?
Why is it listed separately? That's very interesting. I don't usually ask it that way, but that's interesting. But just say our God?
Yeah, because it's essentially the same God.
Well, I guess unless you knew the people you were talking to, saying our God means we have an allegiance to him, but it doesn't locate him historically, it doesn't locate him among the world religions. If you know that we are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you know that they had a certain classical historical religion, and you say it's our God and the God of our fathers, that I think helps identifying who we're talking about. But it's a nice question. Anything else that could be commented on? Why is it out of chronological order? Why do we put ourselves before our fathers? It's at least worth asking. So, one answer that people give is that, why are you asking here, Rabbi? It's an explicit verse that we say every morning. If you look on page 79, about a third of the way down the page, God is my might and my praise, and he was my salvation. This is my God, and I will build him a sanctuary, the God of my father, and I will exalt him. So here the verse puts my God before the God of my father. Now what's the Jewish challenge to that answer? Jewish challenge is, okay, the prayers follow the verse. Why did the verse do it that way? They don't just, talk about religion as a science stopper. God did it, and don't say anything else, which is stupid. It's dumb in philosophy of science. I'm not doing that now. So you have to ask, why would it be that way in the verse?
First, they're looking from personal experience, and then we relate to family tradition.
Okay, why would you do that? I think that's right. Mine speaks about my particular experience, and then second, but why would you put it in that order?
Because Shmone is a personal prayer at first.
Oh, because Shmone Esrei is a personal prayer. Well, I didn't speak about that, but we have to talk about that. The whole of the Shmone Esrei, the prayers are in the plural. You're speaking as a member of the nation, not as an individual.
Yeah,
You have to put yourself in as an individual, as an addition to what's written there. You shouldn't be thinking of yourself as an individual.
But present community, not past communities. So at first we talk.
I don't know why you would limit it that way. I don't know why you would limit that way. Well, let me give you a parable and see if this can help explain it. You know that 600 years ago, 700 years ago in Europe, there was a economic and social condition called a lord and a serf, the medieval serfdom. A serf was a person who pretty much belonged to his lord. He worked on the lord's land. He gave him a portion of the crop. In return, the lord had a military force, and roving robbers and crooks couldn't disturb him because the lord's military force would protect him. It was a mutually beneficial deal. Yeah, there were people who cheated and people who used it for cruelty, but it was a mutually beneficial deal. Now, how did you get to be a serf? Well, you could volunteer. You go to the Lord and say, listen, I'm not making it on my own. I'm subject to all sorts of attacks. Take me on as a serf of yours. I'll work on your lands. I'll give you a third of the crop. We'll do it that way. If you do that, if you become a serf, your children are also serfs. They're born into serfdom, which, as I'm trying to explain, might or might not be good. It says that one shouldn't confuse this with a vicious, victimizing setup. Sometimes it worked out that way, sometimes it didn't. Now let's imagine Reuven. Reuven sees that going on his own is not working. He goes to the local lord with a little L, says, I want to become your serf, and takes him on, and Reuven's very happy. He's very happy. This lord is fair, he keeps his word, his protection is good protection, the land is good land, and he's very happy. Gets married and has children, and the children are also serfs. Reuven's son grows up, and he learns about the world and learns about the opportunities, and he says, my father did a good job. He made a good decision. I look at other people and how they're faring in life. He made a very good life for us. And I want to express my gratitude to the Lord. I wanted to explain to him how I feel. So he goes in to the Lord and he says, listen, my father is your serf, and therefore I am your serf. I want you to know that if I hadn't been born into serfdom, I would have volunteered to become your serf like my father did. I think you're terrific. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. It's mutually beneficial for both of us. I want you to know I'm making the decision on my own, not just because my father was your serf and I was born into it. Okay, now, suppose our texts were the opposite in the verse and in the prayers. Suppose I said, God of my fathers and my God. That would leave it ambiguous. Why is he my God? Why am I attached to him? Could be simply that my father has made a compact with this God, and there's a compact that embraces the people as a whole. I mentioned this yesterday. It could be elaborated. And I inherited it because I'm the child of someone who made that compact. Very similar to the fact that because you're Americans, those of you who are Americans, American laws apply to you, even though it was your great-grandfathers who elected the representatives that passed the law, and you had nothing to do with it, but you're Americans. By being Americans, you inherit that compact that was made generations ago. So it could be that I'm a Jew because of my ancestry, and that's my total connection to it. So if I say, God of my fathers and my God, it could be I just inherited it as being my God. If I say, my God and God of my fathers, then you definitely are saying the opposite. You're saying, my relationship to Kodesh Baruch is because I chose it, I want it, I validate it. Yes, I inherited it from my fathers, but that isn't the only basis of it. The basis of it, in part, is the fact that I chose it for myself. I think that's when you're thinking of, when you're standing before Kodesh Baruch Hu, and you're saying these words, and thinking of your relationship with him, one thing that you should have in mind is that you choose this relationship. Are we together? Okay, now it says, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. What would you like to ask about that?
You already mentioned fathers beforehand.
Okay, number one, we mentioned the fathers beforehand, and I think you could take for granted that when we know here who are the forefathers, number one, why say it all together? And if you're going to say it, then why not?
Because of Jacob. He was the last one.
Yeah, why repeat the words God of? We saw the verse, I showed it to you, where it says, repeats it, but there are other verses where it doesn't repeat it. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What would the point of repeating it be? The simple explanation is that when you say God of, you're talking about a relationship. Now, God is who he is. But a relationship is created by an interaction between two. And when you have God of Abraham, it's a relationship between God and Abraham. When you have Isaac, who's a different person, the relationship is a different relationship. What this is telling us is that God's relationship with each person is different because of the person that he is. God takes into account the uniqueness of the person. It's not the same, stamped out the same way. Like a cookie cutter cuts a picture of a dreidel, you have the 4,000 dreidels. It's not like that. And this is a different idea from the previous idea. The previous idea is, where does a relationship come from? This idea is, what's the quality of the relationship? So different people have different strengths and different weaknesses. That's because they were created to do a particular job in the world. They were put into a particular environment where their gifts and weaknesses are crucial for the way in which they have to do that job, and no two jobs are identical. Just like no two people are identical. If identical twins don't end up identical. As you probably know, they don't have the same fingerprints. That shows there are features operating on them that distinguish them even before they're born. So there are no duplicates, and that means that when you are growing and you're growing to develop your spirituality in relation with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, you're in a tricky position. On the one hand, you don't want to do it on your own. You don't want to invent the wheel. You can use the wheels that were invented before. But on the other hand, you can't just imitate someone else. You can't just imitate someone else. You have to take what you see in others and graft it onto your reality. That means that you have a unique spiritual challenge. You can get advice. It's wise to get advice in almost every area of life. But the advice has to be, how will I graft it onto my reality? And in particular, for those of us who didn't grow up with a religious background, I don't like from birth, because a 3-day-old baby is not frum. So I like RR, raised religious. There are those, Rav Nata Schiller, he should be well, one of the founders of Ohr Somayach, was speaking to a reporter from the New York Times. This was 40 years ago. I was there when it happened. And the reporter asked Rav Schiller, would you call yourselves born-again Jews? Now, you know what Lahavdil born-again Christians are. So when you're obviously helping people make a major life transition, which affects their values and their worldview and their priorities, would you call yourselves born-again Jews? And he said, no, we would not, because you take your past with you. You don't simply discard your path and start anew. That would be being born again. No. And the deepest reason why you take your past with you is because your past wasn't an accident. Well, it didn't just happen. You have a unique soul, and the Creator arranged that your soul should be born into a certain family, into a certain century, into a certain piece of geography, into a certain culture, certain economics, certain educational state. All that was programmed to set you up for the challenge that you have. So that being the case, you want to try to learn how to use what you went through. You don't just imitate it. You do change, but change it by using what you went through to produce something new rather than simply discarding it. So this is all built into the idea that Kodesh Baruch Hu was a different relationship with each person. And with the patriarchs, he had a different relationship with each of the patriarchs. So that's one of the things we learn by repeating the God of in that way. Are we together so far? Now, there's another thing going on here. There is a midrash which says the only people in the history of the world where we say God of so-and-so are Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No one else ever, not before or after. Won't even say of the Mashiach. Why is that? What did they have that no one else had that qualified them for that distinction? There is a midrash where King David asked this of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, why only the three of them? What about me? I want you to be known as Elokei Dovid, the God of David. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, well, I tested them, and they passed the tests. So King David said, test me. And God said, you're on. So he gave him a test, and he failed. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, see, that's why they have this distinction, and you don't. Okay, that's the tip of the iceberg. What exactly is going on here? What does it mean to be called Elokei so-and-so?
Why then not God of Moshe?
Yeah, why not? Right, God of Moshe, and why not God of David? Okay, and Yehuda and Levi and there are other great people in Jewish history that could have been God of Solomon. So, one thing that's going on here is this. People have different strengths and weaknesses, people have different challenges, different responsibilities, and different degrees of success. One of the things that you look at when you look at a person is to try to see where does his service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu lie, and what can I learn? Hopefully what you learn is he's successful at this and this and this, and these are some of his strategies, and I can try to implement his strategies in my context. Sometimes you also learn the things they do wrong. And you say, I see what he tried to do here. I see it turned out disastrously, so I'm not going to do that. You look at other people and you try to learn from them. There are people whose lives express godliness to an exquisite degree, to the extent that if someone said to a Jew, I don't know much about Judaism, and I'm interested in understanding your religion, in particular, what do you think about God? What's your conception of God? You could say, listen, you want a primer, an introduction of our nature of God? Look at Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Look at their lives. Look at the qualities in their lives, and you'll see something about the way we think about God. This is based on a principle which itself is almost shocking. We are commanded to develop God-like characteristics. Just as he is merciful, so you too shall be merciful, it says in the Talmud. Just as he is gracious, so you too should be gracious. In another source it says, just as he is holy, so you should be holy. There's a psukim that say that. Now, if you stop and think about it, this is a challenging idea. The infinite creator, who's beyond even the spiritual, somehow has qualities, and we should develop similar qualities. That's not obvious at all. If the tradition had said the opposite, we would all nod our heads. He's an infinite creator. He's beyond all of the creation. You can't have anything in common with him. We would all nod and say, of course. The gap is infinite. How can we possibly share anything with him? But that's not what it says. Now, you all know where this comes from. It says that God created man in his image. It doesn't really say image, it's not image, it's a long story. But obviously there's something of God which God used as a template to create us. So he did do that. He did make that possible. So now I could say there are people whose lives portray these qualities which are similar to divine qualities. Such a person, Kadosh Baruch Hu gives the distinction of having a title for God built on his name. Who is the creator? He's God of Abraham. Not meaning only the one whom Abraham worships, but he's the God whose Abraham's life portrays his characteristics. And Isaac and Jacob. And only those three. Only those three. which doesn't mean that they were superior to all other Jews in every aspect. Their prophecy was inferior to that of Moses. But when you take this sum total of their lives and the complex reality that their lives portray, they are more faithful portrayals of divine qualities than any other people in the history of the world. So what we're saying here is they are our patriarchs, not just genealogically, but they, so to speak, set up the canvas and painted the colors out of which our pictures of life can be painted. And that's why they're here. And that's why the three of them are mentioned, because they were different. The pictures were different. The qualities were different. We together so far?
Yeah.
I want to say one more thing. We'll talk about what those qualities are. We've spoken about this a little bit, but now I want to put them together in a certain way. We spoke about loving kindness. We spoke about that as the source of the motivation of God to create the world. Abraham's spiritual essence was based on loving kindness. We spoke about withholding, justice, judgment. That was Isaac's central spiritual quality. Those two qualities stand in complementary cooperation. In fact, what I was telling you before about the writing of the divine name and the pronunciation has the same dynamic. One is the giver, that's loving kindness, and the other is the restrainer, the restrictor, because the giving has to be tailored to the needs of the recipient. So one gives and the other restricts and restrains, filters. And obviously, the ideal is that they should work together. Jacob is a combination of those two qualities. Jacob is the way in which the two qualities combine so that they can work together. Now, I worked on this for a long time. What kind of combination is it? I tried mathematical ideas. I tried ideas from physics, ideas from chemistry, ideas from cosmology. Nothing worked. I couldn't get a consistent description of what's going on. So I spoke to my oldest son, who was very smart, and he said, "Abba, you're trying to express a Jewish idea using non-Jewish concepts. Why would you try to do that? Why not use a Jewish concept?" "Oh," I said, "that sounds logical. What Jewish concept do you have in mind?" And he said the concept of or and kli, light and vessel. Light and vessel are the Kabbalistic terms for what I've talked now about twice. There's a light shining. Can you benefit from the light? It all depends. Where you are, what your sensation organs can take, and what kind of light it is. You can't look directly into the sun, because a person does that, it becomes blind. There was a gimmick, we have it today, we have visual filters today, but there was a gimmick of taking glass and treating it in a certain way so it becomes what they call smoked glass, which is translucent, but it blocks out most of the light. And that's what they use to look at the sun. If you hold that up and look at the sun through it, you get a pale yellow image, which you can see easily, because almost all the light's blocked out. And what's left gives you an image that you can deal with. So you've got the source of light, and then you have the vessel that blocks it, filters it, and lets enough through so that you can receive it. That's an image that you have throughout Kabbalah. Or and Kli, the light that's shining, which means it's giving, and the vessel which restricts the light. So now, that's what's going on with Jacob. Jacob has the impetus to give, but he also has a vessel which restricts that impetus and then can guide it and filter it to the right the application for the recipient. Just as we said with loving kindness and justice, we said we said with respect to justice and mercy. Mercy, we said, is a reaction to justice. Mercy is always a reaction to something else. holding it back. Right? It's holding it back. Mercy couldn't exist on its own. You can't start a relationship or start an interaction with mercy. Mercy presupposes a prior interaction where rules were set down and consequences were laid out, and then there were failures, and there's now on the table possible consequences, and mercy holds it back. The vessel is a restrictor. Therefore, the vessel depends upon the existence of the light. Without the existence of the light, there's nothing to restrict. And therefore, there's nothing for a restrictor to do. The vessel must have light for it to exist. The light doesn't need the vessel. Light doesn't need the vessel. It may not be applicable to all circumstances because its effects will be too powerful, but its very existence doesn't require a vessel. The existence of the vessel requires the light. That's why in Kabbalistic sources, the vessel has to be connected to the light. If it isn't connected to the light, it dies in a certain sense, because it's a restrictor with nothing to restrict it. It has nothing to do. Okay, so this is what Jacob is. Jacob is a combination of the light and the vessel which restricts it, which enables there to be a kind of filtering process to let out as much light as is necessary for the circumstances. Now, let me say one more thing, and then I'll take a question. Having said that, many years ago, I thought to myself, okay, so who are we? Once it had to come into existence step by step, first Abraham, then Isaac, and then Jacob. Now we have the trio, and Jacob has made the amalgamation. And Jacob is the name of the nation. The name is Israel, which is Jacob's name. So we are the ones who inherit from Jacob most directly. And I suppose that means that for all of us, we have some aspect of giving and some aspect of restricting, and we make our amalgam in imitation of Jacob. I thought that was a way to describe our spirituality, but the sources don't say that. The sources don't say that. They say some people in the world have their root in Abraham, and some in Isaac, and some in Jacob. So I thought, why is that? Why not have everybody be Jacob's? Abraham and Isaac are the pure, isolated features. They need to be brought together. They need to function together. And I came up with an answer, and I asked scholars, and they seem to be in agreement with me. The project is to make the amalgamation continuously, not just to rely on the fact that the patriarchs did it, Abraham bringing his into existence, Isaac his, and Jacob amalgamate. No, there's a continuous amalgamation going on, which makes our social life very complex. We spoke about speech, and speech being the medium of social life. Here now you're beginning to see that the spirituality of an individual Jew is directly dependent upon it being a group enterprise. So a person can think, where do I come from? What's my basic nature? What's my basic expression in the world? And it could be that he's just a very kind person, one who identifies with others, one who feels fulfillment in others' progress and others' development. Say, who've been Abraham type. And other people are basically responsible. What is it that needs to be done? What's my obligation? Like the beginning of the Mesilas Yesharim. Ma chovaso ba'olamo. What is my obligation in my world? What must be done? What Akash Baruch Hu wants, that's what must be done. That's how the book starts. That's a different type. These people have to know, yes, you have your shorish, your root, but your function is to operate together with others who are different from you to amalgamate into a joint performance where the things are balanced. So that the amalgamation is a continuing process. That's part of what's being communicated here. We say God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. Those three sources, those three roots are functioning still till today. But we have to relate to them by participating in the process of amalgamation. Yeah.
How is this is like the image of justice? Because even like God blinded him, not seeing. Like he didn't want Isaac to see for some reason. He misjudged the character of his eldest son. His wife had to fix it. Like, how is he attribute of justice?
Okay, first of all, to say that someone has a certain attribute does not mean that he will administer it perfectly. We're human beings and we make mistakes, no question about that, number one. Number two, I would just like to inform you that throughout the ancient world, statues of justice are blind, always. Always. There's a blindfold over the eyes. Meaning, the same rules apply to everyone equally without taking into account any other features than what did they do vis-a-vis the law. There's a certain blindness with justice, so it can be appropriate in certain ways. That's number two. Number three, I think, let's put it this way, there's a great deal of discussion about Isaac and how he related to his children. And I can't account for everything that's said by all of the commentators, but the simple meaning in the verses is, as far as I can understand it, is that he didn't make a drastic mistake with respect to his son. Isaac had two sons, Jacob and Esau, and at a certain point he wanted to give a blessing, and I don't think he gave a blessing specifically to Esau and not to Jacob. And if you don't read carefully, the way I read carefully, others read differently, you could think he's regarding Esau as the superior son, superior to Jacob. That would be a gigantic mistake. I think if you read through the story of the details, you'll see it's very hard to say that that was his mistake. I'll just give you a few things to think about. First of all, what happens is Isaac tells Esau, go and make me lunch, and after lunch I'll give you the blessing. And while he's out, Jacob comes in and gets the blessing because his mother told him to do it. Okay. What's the content of the blessing? What's given in the blessing? Money and power and success. That's all. Just physical. Just physical. Nothing else. Well, that means thinking he wanted to give it to Esau, what he gave was something, a physical blessing. At the end of the parsha, he calls Jacob in and says, you're going to be the third patriarch. You're going to inherit the land of Israel. You're going to carry on the tradition of Abraham. So that was on the table, but not for Esau. It was never for Esau. So it sounds to me like Isaac knew very well that Esau isn't going to be the third patriarch. The Jewish people isn't going to come out of him. That was saved for Jacob in any case. But he had some other project with respect to Esau. Now the Abarbanel explains the project as follows. Esau had trouble. He had problems. That's why Esau's blessing was going to be after lunch. Jacob's blessing wasn't after lunch. Didn't need lunch. Esau needed it because his weaknesses, he had to do something positive, like serving his father, which was a genuine, strong point for him. And then that created a connection with his father, that his father could give him a blessing. But Jacob didn't need that. So Isaac recognizes that Esau has problems and weaknesses, and his thought was, I'm going to create a permanent association between the two brothers. I'm going to give to Esau money and power. Jacob will need to have those resources available to him, so Jacob will need to have them from Esau. That will create a continuous contact between them, interaction between them, and maybe Jacob can improve Esau in a way because Isaac loved Esau. Which isn't to mean to say he didn't love Jacob, but he loved Esau. So he's trying to save him. And even that was a mistake. Even that was a mistake. And that's what Rivka knew, and she had to stop that mistake. But it wasn't that he thought he was the superior son and all the rest. That's very difficult to read into the words. So that to me is at least the most straightforward way to look at the situation. Yeah.
Are you insinuating that Esau was supposed to be like a partner for Jacob and give him money? Like Issachar and Zebulun kind of? And Jacob wouldn't even have to be like in the world of commerce? Is that what you're saying?
I don't remember that the Bible goes that far, but at least they'll be interacting with one another because Jacob will need the help of Esau.
What would Jacob provide for Esau? That's my question.
No, here, the way I understood the Bible now is just that they'll be interacting all the time. If you're interacting, you could have that influence. By the way, having said all of that, let's be clear. Maybe I'm taking this for granted. I shouldn't. Esau was not born to be evil. No one is born to be evil. People function with free will. Now you'll tell me, but Rabbi, I remember a midrash when she was pregnant with the twins and she walked past a house of Torah study. Jacob wanted to come out, and we walked past a house of idol worship. Esau wanted to come out. That's right. They wanted to come out. Why? Because there are two types of processes to improve the world. One type is you bring holiness and purity into the world, and the other is you chase evil out of the world. And both are necessary. And Jacob was designated the process of bringing holiness and purity into the world, and Esau was designated to chase evil out of the world. That's why he wanted to come out with a place of idol worship, because that's his locus, that's his environment, that's where his job is to be done. And that's why it says later that when he rebelled and when he failed, Jacob took his own portion of the world to come, and he took Esau's portion of the world to come. Because there was a portion of the world to come set aside for Esau, because he should have succeeded at his task. And there would have been. And then there would have been 4 patriarchs. Just like there were 4 matriarchs. And indeed, when Jacob went to Haran, and Rachel and Leah were there in the family, and the tradition they had was, well, there are 2 brothers and two sisters. And it's natural that the oldest sister should go to the oldest brother. That would be Leah to Esau. And the youngest sister, Rachel, to the younger brother Jacob. That wasn't just stupidity. It wasn't silliness or nonsense. It was true. That's the way it could have been if he had succeeded in what he was supposed to do. So you have to understand that he wasn't destined to be evil. And that's why, by the way, Chazal say, when Jacob meets up with Esau and he presents his family to Esau, and it says the mothers and all their children bowed down to Esau, and there's one child missing. Who's missing?
Daughter.
Yeah, Dinah, the daughter, right? And Jacob was punished for that. Why was he punished for that? He hid her. If I had going to meet Esau, and I had a daughter, I'd hide her also. But it was wrong. Why? Because Chazal say that Dinah could have turned him around. She could have actually turned him around. And Jacob denied him that possibility. So therefore Jacob was punished for that later. So there's no question that Esau was given a challenge, and the hope was that he would succeed at the challenge, and he would have been rewarded if he had succeeded at the challenge. And in fact, he ended up not succeeding. So this is just some perspective on the idea. So now Isaac did use his quality. I'll say one more thing when we come this far, when it's come the hour already. I said that people don't use their midos perfectly. The Zohar points out something very interesting. You said correctly, Isaac favored Esau too much in a certain way. It says also that Abraham favored Ishmael too much and had to be corrected by his wife. She said, expel him from the house because he's deteriorating, he didn't want to, and he had to do that. According to the Zohar, Ishmael had Abraham's basic character, but spoiled in a certain way. And Esau had Isaac's basic character, spoiled in a certain way. And the two fathers were attracted to the identity of character. He's me. I see me in the next generation. I can't abandon that. The truth is that the next generation had to be led by someone who was different from him, not him ever again. It needed a complementary characteristic. And it goes even further to say that Jacob favored Joseph too much, because Jacob saw in Joseph himself, his own basic character. Midrash says everything that happened to Jacob happened to Joseph. So this pattern repeats, and that pattern is something that is a lesson for us. When you have children, children are different from one another. Okay, you pledge allegiance, you know the rules. Every child has to be trained in his own way, according to his own character. You say the words, and you believe it, But when this one is like you, and you can share, and you can see yourself in him, you're drawn to him in a way that you aren't drawn to the other one. And you have to be very aware of that, and very careful about that. to know that there's a built-in tilt in your way you relate to your children, and you have to compensate for that. You have to make sure that you can control that. Okay, these are some ideas from the words here. Yeah.
Last question. So, the Merkava is just referring to before Shmone Esrai days, but David actually has two prayers, right? He has Yerushalayim, he said David, and also he has Etzemach David. So he's in Shmone Esrai.
I didn't say anything about not being in the Shmone Esrei.
I was just saying.
All I said is that he's not called, God is not called God of David.
Oh, yeah.
That's all. I wasn't saying anything else. Sure he's there.
So where was this idea of